Bucknutters, welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, April 4th, 2018. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Bax, the media will get a chance to interview linebackers coach Billy Davis, new/old corners coach Taver Johnson, and some linebackers and some corners after practice today. Probably around like 11:30 today, 11:45, right around that after practice. Let's start with Billy Davis and the linebackers. I don't know if any coach on the staff has been more maligned than Bill Davis. He's only been on the staff for 1 year. And now, they could have the best linebacker coach in the country. Linebackers will still be the biggest concern on the team, in my opinion. Just your thoughts on Billy Davis and the job he has cut out for him this year.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's a giant concern, even if you had the greatest linebacker coach in the history of linebacker coaches coaching the linebackers. If you had the best guy that Penn State ever had and the best guy Ohio State ever had, and combine their DNA, we'd still be worried, just because the fact of the matter is you have a set of linebackers that is vastly inexperienced. None of these guys have played hardly at all. We were talking about Tough Borland being hurt, a guy who was a freshman last year, and he was the most experienced linebacker in terms of playing time. So it's a real big concern. There's a lot of talent. I put this in the bucket. We're hoping that 2 5-star guys can pan out, that one of them's good enough to play, right? When you're talking about the middle linebacker battle between Hilliard and Browning. But, it's a concern because it's the one position group on the entire team where you look at it and you're like, I have no idea. I think Malik Harrison and Keandre Jones are. I think that. I think that I would prefer Browning to start, but I think Hilliard's going to start. I think. But I haven't seen hardly anything in the game from any of these guys. Harrison's really the only one of these guys that has much run. So it's a concern. And then you add Billy Davis to the equation, which, look, fair or not fair, he's Urban Meyer's best friend. He hasn't coached in college since 1991 until last year for a reason. And look, if there's a concern about nepotism, you better be damn good at your job. And from what we saw last year, it isn't quite the case. And this is Columbus, Ohio. If your position coach is not getting the job done, ask Tim Beck how it works out. So Billy Davis is on the hot seat in the eyes of the media. Certainly not the eyes of his best friend, but let's put it this way. Davis has to have a good year from these linebackers for anybody to really buy into the fact that he's an elite linebackers coach. That simple. If he can get this unit playing really well, then great, because his first year was a disaster, to put it lightly. He stuck with Dante Booker, who couldn't react to him whatsoever. It took him forever to recognize Tough Borland needed to be on the field. They put C.J. Worth middle linebacker when he should have stayed outside, something we all said before the season, and Jerome Baker appeared disinterested at best. That's not a good debut season. So, yeah, Davis has the most to prove of all the coaches on the staff, no question, and he has the least experience to prove it with in terms of the players in his position group.
I was going to ask you if Billy Davis deserved the criticism that he has received from fans. You answered that in droves, so I will move on. Pete Werner. Pete Werner's a guy that sounds like he's getting a lot of buzz in spring. You never know. We hear about 30 guys each year at spring ball that are quote-unquote tearing it up, but it does feel like Pete Werner's having a good spring. We're even experimenting with him in the middle, it sounds like. A guy that I'm pretty bullish on. I don't know how good he could do as a middle linebacker as a sophomore, and he's more like an outside linebacker. But I tell you what, I like watching this kid on special teams last year, Bax. Just your thoughts on Pete Werner.
Well, if somebody's going to beat out Harrison and Jones at outside linebacker, he's the clear front runner. I think Werner is a big-time guy that, look, a lot of people don't, I think people forget about Pete Werner. And here's why. They see Pete Werner as this guy who, oh, yeah, we added him late in the class. Notre Dame had him until the very end. So we didn't have this, 10-month-long involvement of, rooting for the kid in high school and following his career, being excited about him getting here. He kind of just flipped fairly late. We added him to the class, and, oh, by the way, he's really good. So, yeah, he's probably not getting as much attention as you would have thought for a kid of his caliber. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised if Pete Werner played a lot this year. And honestly, he's got a good pedigree. He was just as big of a recruit. Keandre Jones, he was a bigger recruit than Harrison. So there's no reason this kid can't get on the field and make an impact. He's one of a number of guys at the linebacker position that we're all going to be watching because, again, we think we know about linebackers. we don't know anything about these linebackers.
And like I said, we're going to get a chance to talk to Taver Johnson later today and the corners. Corner is never a concern at DBU. It's just a matter of will they be good or great. You got Arnett and Sheffield. Okuda is on the sideline right now, but it's a minor injury. I think Okuda's going to have a big year. I think Sheffield's going to have a big year. Arnett is somewhat of a question mark, although I do think he will step up. It's funny how some of these corners who don't look real good sometimes early in their career end up looking like studs after they've had some playing time. You got Sean Wade. I'm not concerned about corner at all. Maybe that's just me. Just your thoughts on the corner position.
You make a good point. Remember Garyon Conley, the year Ohio State won the national title? He was crispy bacon the whole year. He was not good. He was frequently torched. And then he went out and had 2 awesome seasons after that. He was significantly better. He was a first-round pick. You see this with some of these young corners. It's not everybody's Marshawn Lattimore where the second they're healthy, they step on the field, they own half the field. That's a rarity, right? So a guy like Kendall Sheffield, who is blatantly athletic, his athletic gifts are not in question. It's his ability to not be a half step slow on coverage, which we saw frequently from him last year. If he's figured that out, he's an elite quarterback. I don't think anybody's debating that. He has all the physical tools you need to do it. But you know what makes me feel really good about the corners more than anything is the fact that they moved Amir Reep from corner to safety. If you didn't feel good about your cornerbacks, you wouldn't be moving one of your most promising young defensive backs, who looked good when we saw him last year, to a different position if you didn't think, between Sheffield, between Wade, between Okuda, between Marcus Williamson, who nobody talks about despite the fact he was a top 10 corner nationally when he came to Ohio State, and even Damon Arnett. You got a bunch of guys who can play corner. So I don't know exactly who is going to step up because that's a bit of an open question, but I feel pretty confident you're going to be able to find 2 or 3 pretty good corners from that group this year, just based on the sheer talent they have. And by the way, we know Taver Johnson can coach. We've seen him do it. So him coming back to Columbus, I'm fascinated to see what his response is to the plethora of talent he has compared to the other places he's been recently. I think it's going to be fun to hear the excitement in Taver Johnson's voice getting to coach athletes of this caliber. So, corner is not a concern. It's like a 2 out of 10 of a concern, if you will, whereas linebackers are about an 8 or a 9 out of 10 right now, and nothing else is above a 3.
No question about it. And when you look at this corner group, who are you most excited about? Is it Okuda or is it somebody else?
I would have said Okuda all the way up until the last week or two here. I think I spent a lot of last year being really critical of Kendall Sheffield because he got burnt a lot. He was always a step behind on every play. He had a rough year last year. And Jeff Okuda looked good when he was in. He played great against USC. I'm very high on Okuda's future at corner. But, the more I have to remind myself of history, because those who don't remember history are condemned to repeat it, right? Well, we just mentioned what happened to Garyon Conley when he got in early. He was not that good. He got burned a lot. And he turned into a great corner. To me, Sheffield, I think with the experience he gets, he could have a really good year this year. Because it was never his athletic ability last year. He was always just a step slow. The ball would get there and he'd be there and he wouldn't get his arm up. Or he wouldn't turn his head around in time and he'd have good coverage. Those sort of things is what happened with Sheffield a lot last year. I kind of think Sheffield's going to be the guy that breaks out this year. I'm not saying that Okuda isn't going to be really good, or a guy like Wade or Williamson isn't going to step up. I think it's just going to be, if one of these guys is going to be a first-round draft pick in the 2019 draft, my guess is it's Sheffield. And I think that's just because we've seen this sort of development that these corners have. And let's face it, if you watched him run this year in the spring for the indoor track team, you know he has athletic ability. So right now, I kind of think that Sheffield's the guy who's going to be the real breakout star of the corners this year.
Great stuff, as always, from the people's champ himself, Matt Baxendell. You can catch his column every Sunday. It is, of course, the Buckets. Thank you very much to Bax, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. Again, as you've heard throughout the show, we will interview the corners and the linebackers and coaches Taver Johnson and Billy Davis at around 11:30, 11:45 after practice today. Thanks again to Bax, and thanks to all the listeners out there. Hope you have a great day. We'll share that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.
Bucknuts.